At what point are there too many lies? It's a different answer for every person. Some might say one lie is too far, others may tolerate hundreds of them. But when we're talking about the story of Jeffrey Epstein, the lies are now stacking so high it's difficult to measure them. At first, the entire saga was a spectacle. The idea of truth seeking was a campaign talking point, a political stunt even. But over the past several months, the story has morphed and contorted so many times, it now bears practically zero resemblance to the original picture, calling into question whether or not anything that the current political administration says, in the United States at least, is even true. Lightning fast recap for anyone who hasn't been paying as close attention. Calls for transparency on the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein go back decades, but only really entered a true mainstream spotlight in late 2019. On the campaign trail, 2024, President Trump was asked by Fox News whether or not he would declassify the Epstein files, to which he replied, yeah, I would. But then, shortly into his second term as president, the real drama started. First, they did phase one with a binder of outdated, already public information and a few influencer stooges to promote it. Phase two never came. What began as a frequent widespread condemnation of alleged deeper corruption throughout the American government that we the people, were unaware of, widely speaking, became a retraction with subsequent denial. All the same administration officials who previously, and very publicly I might add, spoke about the undisclosed crimes and connections of Jeffrey Epstein suddenly changed their minds. FBI Director Kash Patel, Attorney General Pam Bondi, Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino, and Presidential Counselor/spokesperson at the time, Alina Habba, just to name a few of them. The official narrative became, there's nothing to see here, despite claims that all the files were sitting on desks, there were truckloads of evidence, and the FBI was allegedly withholding things, and that phase two of the Epstein file release was right around the corner. Understandably, the fact that the federal government was now contradicting themselves openly and completely reversing course on whether or not the most prolific predator in modern memory had any further associates or clients. Understandably, that kind of reversal raised a multitude of questions, but it only got worse from there. The knee-jerk reaction by supporters, and I've said this before, so bear with me, I am repeating myself from some of these videos, but I feel like I have to say this. The knee-jerk reaction by supporters and fans was that the Democrats would have used it if there was anything to use, speaking about the idea that something damaging might be there with regards to President Trump. If it existed, they would have used it, which would be absolutely true if they could have. But the reality behind the scenes was that while prosecuting Jeffrey Epstein, and then after his death, prosecuting his co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell, as well as her subsequent appeals afterwards, the files remained under court-ordered seal. So while understandable and likely true that political opponents would use damaging things wherever possible, in this case, the files didn't become available across government agencies until shortly before Trump resumed office. The Epstein debacle not only truly began while Trump was the sitting president, late 2019, for his second, much more publicized arrest, but with files under seal until right before he came back in 2025, the subsequent meltdown and lack of transparency is also undeniably the responsibility of the current administration. There is no obfuscation or dodging possible on this issue. Still, the evolution of the lie was only just beginning. After the DOJ memo was made public, claiming that there were no further criminals, no further leads, and that the entire case would be effectively shut down, public and media outcry began really gathering traction, which the president decidedly did not enjoy. What was previously a multi-phase truth-seeking expedition became a Democrat hoax, with repeated claims that Biden, Obama, or the Clintons were somehow responsible for making up or fabricating the files, despite the fact that none of them held consequential office during the FBI investigations. The first official investigation of Jeffrey Epstein occurred between 2006 and 2008, under oversight of the Bush administration, and the second, more complex investigation took place in 2019, which was obviously the tail end of President Trump's own first term in office. Regardless of the facts, once this new denial narrative was voiced, it became a widespread talking point. Trump's own reaction to fans questioning the Epstein situation was visceral, by the way, posting and deleting things about how the Jeffrey Epstein hoax was a scam, and how his supporters that fell for it were no longer wanted. In the evolution of a lie, the Epstein files had gone from a soundbite on the simple campaign trail about transparency or accountability in government to a scam concocted by people who didn't even hold office at the relevant times. But we're still not done. As an effort to appease the masses, raw footage was released, big air quotes there, raw footage was released, of the supposed prison camera that would allegedly prove that there was nothing more to investigate. Except it did the exact opposite. The footage was not raw, it was ghost footage captured as a screen recording, and as per a Wired investigation, edited multiple times in Adobe Premiere. On top of the nearly uncountable number of discrepancies in that footage, I have a whole video about those dedicated to it, the fact that the administration was still openly lying only further exacerbated a problem of media and public interest, which is where we get to the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal, in a highly controversial article that some people were very critical of me for even talking about previously, posted about a supposed birthday letter from Trump to Jeffrey Epstein discussing a wonderful secret that the two friends supposedly shared. The existence of such a letter, if it were real, is optically horrible for the president, and with a completely expected level of vitriol, President Trump attacked the publication and claimed that the letter was a total fabrication by a third-rate outlet. Notably, Vice President J.D. Vance chimed in saying, quote, "Where is this letter?" while the president himself denied authenticity, saying that he doesn't draw pictures. Except he certainly does draw pictures, in heavy marker, just like the alleged birthday card. And behind the scenes of public discourse, this is the important part, the actual wheels of government process were turning. To the surprise of absolutely no one, Trump opened a $10 billion defamation case against the Wall Street Journal, which contained language such as the following, quote, "Indeed, defendants Safdar and Palazzolo provide a series of quotes from the non-existent letter," end quote, or further down, quote again, "On the other hand, defendants Safdar and Palazzolo failed to attach the letter, failed to attach the alleged drawing, failed to show proof that President Trump authored or signed any such letter, and failed to explain how this purported letter was obtained. The reason for those failures is because no authentic letter or drawing exists. Defendants concocted this story to malign President Trump's character and integrity and deceptively portray him in a false light," end quote. As we can clearly see, not only is the authenticity of the letter being disputed, its mere existence is disputed as well. It gets better though, or it gets worse, I guess, because in an effort to once again obfuscate and distract, Trump's own former personal defense attorney, now at the Department of Justice, brought Ghislaine Maxwell in for what's called a proffer interview, during which she lied repeatedly and praised Donald Trump, saying things like, quote, I admire his extraordinary achievement in becoming the president now, and I like him, and I've always liked him, so that is the sum and substance of my entire relationship with him," end quote. Like she's begging for a pardon, basically. In multiple further paragraphs, she attempts to clear him from any possible speculation of wrongdoing, reiterating that he never did or said anything unprofessional in any capacity whatsoever, period, ever, never, ever, ever. But immediately after this glowing praise, in an unprecedented move, she gets transferred, with a special waiver, to a minimum security prison that she does not qualify for because she is a convicted sex offender. But, like we just said previously, the wheels of actual government process were turning in the background. House Democrats, in an effort to not only harm their political opposition, admittedly, but also capitalize on a perceived public interest wave, because the story of Jeffrey Epstein is refusing to die, mostly as a result of the administration's own rampant incompetence, subpoenaed the Epstein estate lawyers, demanding that files be submitted which included this controversial letter from the Wall Street Journal article, which was then handed over in the birthday book by the estate. Basically, there is a letter, period. Of course, that does not definitively mean that the president himself signed the birthday letter, but the entire dispute from the current administration talking heads about how the Wall Street Journal made it all up has now fallen flat on its face, because this right here is the supposed letter, which was obtained with a legal subpoena. All sorts of handwriting experts have now crawled out of the woodwork to say whether it is or it isn't the president's signature, whether it does or doesn't match other signatures at the time, but the susceptibility for even the most dim-witted people to continue believing the lies of the current administration when it comes to the Epstein fiasco in its totality has to be wearing thin at this point, right? As if it could get any worse, in a spontaneous interview, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson decided to say this.
And he's not saying that what Epstein did is a hoax. It's a terrible, unspeakable evil. He believes that himself. When he first heard the rumor, he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. He was an FBI informant to try to take this stuff down. The president knows and has great sympathy for the women who have suffered these unspeakable harms. It's detestable to him. He and I have spoken about this as recently as 24 hours ago.
That is a very important distinction because the word informant carries precise connotations. In order for someone to be an FBI informant, they must have knowledge of criminal operations, typically because of their close proximity to those crimes. Often they're going to be convicted for something and there's a lighter sentence held over their head to get cooperation. And as per the Office of Justice programs, they, quote, penetrate a criminal subculture, end quote, which would mean that if President Trump, despite the fact that he has now repeatedly called the entire Epstein situation a Democrat hoax, if he were in fact an FBI informant, not only would there be extensive documentation of that, but he would also have possessed much more intimate knowledge of Epstein's crimes than previously advertised. This is the point where things presumably should start hitting critical mass of lies. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson quickly clarified what he meant in a later statement, probably because he realized the implications and contradictions, but the clarification doesn't really make it all that much better.
What do you mean by that?
What I was referring to in that long conversation was what the victim's attorney said. More than a decade ago, President Trump kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago, and he was one of the only people, one of the only prominent people, as everyone has reported, not President Trump, but everybody about him, that he was willing to help law enforcement go after this guy who was a disgusting trafficker. All the allegations, that's what they heard. So the president was helpful in that. I don't know if I use the right terminology, but that's common knowledge and everybody knows that. So this is much ado about nothing.
Did the president tell you this specifically about his involvement?
I said, I was recounting what others have said. The president and I have talked about the Epstein evils many times. He's as disgusted by it as everybody else. He has long had a history of acknowledging that, and he has said repeatedly he wants everything to come out, all credible information, everything for the American public to decide.
Was he ever asked to wear a wire or anything like that?
I have no idea. No, I'm not saying that. I have no information about that whatsoever. I was repeating what has been common knowledge for a long time. The president was helpful in trying to get Epstein, for the law enforcement to go after Epstein. That's always been my understanding. That's common knowledge. It's the public's understanding. I was not breaking news there.
The thing to hone in on here is that Trump allegedly kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago more than a decade ago, I guess, but the actual timeline is a lot less flattering. Trump didn't kick Epstein out until 2007, as per independent investigation, which was after his first conviction. And despite conflicting reports, some claiming that the friendship ended because of a real estate deal, others because of inappropriate behavior towards a teenager at the club who was the daughter of a member, the president himself came out publicly and said that he banned Jeffrey Epstein from Mar-a-Lago because he was poaching employees. Let me be as precise as possible. He wasn't just recruiting or poaching employees, despite what the president says. He was grooming underage spa workers from Mar-a-Lago and then ushering them into a world of abuse. It doesn't matter what kind of political spin you try to put on this to make someone look better, because before he was ever banned from Mar-a-Lago, he had already been indicted and convicted. If Donald Trump was really some sort of informant, this would only have happened well and truly after Epstein used Mar-a-Lago as a hunting ground, after he was convicted the first time, and in direct contradiction of the president's numerous claims that he had no knowledge of Epstein's crimes, despite that being a near impossibility at this point. We have now cycled through every single one of the following narratives. 1. The Epstein files are real. We will leave no stone unturned. We will declassify them. 2. Phase 1 has commenced. The list is on my desk. Truckloads of evidence. Phase 2 is approaching soon. 3. There are no Epstein files that are relevant. The case is closed. Don't ask about it. 4. The entire thing is a Democrat hoax. I guess there are files, it is real, but the whole thing is a Democrat hoax. 5. There is no letter. It does not exist. 6. Actually, there is a letter, but it's not his signature. It's fake. And now 7. Trump was an FBI informant who helped bring Epstein down, except it's a Democrat hoax. At what point are there too many lies? At what point do we, collectively, stand back and realize that basically nothing these people say can be considered true until they prove it to be true, because they have now completely destroyed their own credibility on the issue of Epstein. We have this amazing yet super flawed human perspective, typically held by supporters of a politician or a celebrity, that what they say is true until proven false. But I propose that on the subject of Epstein, as a result of repeated flagrant and indisputable lies, I propose that any reasonable person adopt a perspective that anything said by the current administration at all be regarded as utterly false until proven true by overwhelming evidence. To be clear, that does not mean that you should automatically believe other narratives about wrongdoing. Assuming guilt because the accused is totally untrustworthy is itself kind of a slippery slope. But when the current administration is so obviously lying with such intense frequency, what they say can no longer be regarded as true. My default assumption now is that on the subject of Jeffrey Epstein, everything Trump says is a complete fabrication. Anything his officials say is an open lie. And without proving every single individual statement that they make with ample evidence, nothing that they say to the American people about this issue should ever be trusted at all. The evolutions of the Epstein lie have come full circle, and contrary to what the current political powers would like to see happen, it's not an issue that is likely to disappear, and it's certainly not one that I believe we should ever let go. I'm old enough now to remember a time when politicians would resign in shame for even a tiny fraction of what these people now do and say on a daily basis. And it makes me very sad to be an American right now. Anyway, that's it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. A special VPN deal, locals and Patreon, channel memberships, merch, social media, etc., etc. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching. Question everything, and have a nice night.